Oh, good. Okay, so here we are. I get to introduce Tammy Frankfurt again, since we want this to be a whole recording. Tammy Reese Frankfurt began teaching in public schools in London, UK 30 years ago. She soon realized she had no tools to help the struggling readers in her class. After having 2 children, she returned to teaching as a support teacher of English language learners. She noticed that some ELL kids picked up reading while others got stuck. Following her observations of her son struggling with reading, she trained in specific learning difficulties, dyslexia, and for the first time discovered structured literacy. This was followed by training in phonographics and then Sounds Right, both linguistic phonics programs. Tammy began to tutor at a dyslexia center, and there she found she did not have suitable decodable reading materials for her students, a theme this whole month. In 2004, together with 2 colleagues, Wendy Tweedy and Claire Baker, hello Claire, she founded Phonic Books Ltd, a specialist publisher of decodable books and resources. Phonic Books, decodable books are now used in more than half of UK elementary schools and in schools all over the country. And I am going to, somebody said our presentation isn't working, but I feel like before you begin, I'm going to, let's see, a few seconds ago. I'm going to ask if somebody watching before we begin in the comment box can confirm that you can see us. It looks like Facebook has a lot of traffic now and we got booted out at our first attempt. So before Tammy comes on and actually begins, I'd like somebody in the comment box just to say that they can hear us. We'll just give it a minute. I think everything is okay. Somebody did text, but it might have been from the last one.
Should we check that they can see the presentation?
I'm watching it on Facebook and it looks good. So I'm just hoping that somebody will confirm. Oh, we're on. It's been confirmed. We are okay. So what I'm just going to announce is that Tammy will be available to ask questions at the end, and I will be watching the comment box throughout. And then over the next couple of days, if there are questions that don't get answered, Tammy will try to address them. So without further gabbing, Tammy.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody from London, UK. I think we should start. And what I want to talk to you today about is how to teach reading with decodable books. So here we go. I'll just go over the things that we're going to cover. I'll just go over some terms that are used in phonics to make sure that everybody understands the terms. And then I'll look at a quick overview of the current thinking about reading, the science of reading. And then we'll go into the more nitty-gritty. What actually are the concepts, skills, and knowledge which a reader needs to know and a teacher needs to know in order to teach them? Do's and don'ts for beginner readers. How to read with a beginner reader. Then we'll talk a little bit about sight words. We'll show how decodable books support phonics teaching. And then I'll talk specifically about our range of high-interest decodable books for older struggling readers and the important things that we thought we should put inside them when we first started to develop them. And lastly, I'll take you through the range from very simple to more complex books for older struggling readers. So let's start with the terms in phonics. A very important term is a phoneme. A phoneme is a speech sound in a word. We often use the word sound instead of phoneme because it's a bit simpler, but if the word phoneme, if you hear the word phoneme, it means a speech sound in a word. Next is grapheme, a bit more difficult to understand. A grapheme is fundamentally the letters that spell that phoneme. So if you have a word like cat, it'll have 3 phonemes, 3 sounds, k, a, t. But it'll also have 3 graphemes, 3 different units of letters, k, at that represent the three sounds. And we'll look at that in detail a bit later. To decode means to translate the written code, all the symbols, the squiggly symbols on the page, and translate those into sound and words. Fundamentally, the alphabetic script that most languages, particularly the Latin languages, all languages in the world use, is a translation of sound into letters. There's some languages that have a combination of syllables, or some of them have pictures that combine syllables and pictures, but our alphabetic code is based on the idea that the sounds of our speech are represented by letters on the page. To encode is the reverse activity. It means to want to convert the speech sounds that we're saying or want to say and translate those into letters on the page. So decoding and encoding are two reverse activities. Blend is to push sounds together to make a word. It's a little bit confusing because sometimes the word blend is also used for the term consonant blends, but we prefer to use blend as a verb and not so much as a noun, because it describes what you actually do as you read, which is you sound out the sounds in the word, you push them together into a word. That is to blend. To segment is the reverse activities. It's when you have a word that you want to write down, then you basically have to separate each sound and then represent it with letters. So we use blending and segmenting when we read and when we spell. Phonemic awareness are the underlying phonological skills that you need to be able to do in order to read and spell. And these include blending and segmenting, but also to manipulate phonemes and words. These three skills need to be part of a phonics program, and we'll talk about that in depth a little bit later. Decodable text is a controlled text with a specific phonic focus. That means that a decodable text will have specific words embedded inside it, so that the child reading the text will be exposed to these words again and again, so they can learn whatever target phonics is in that book. And I'll give you examples later on in the talk. Authentic texts are those texts which will enrich, engage, entertain, and develop vocabulary. And they also have a very, very important role to play in reading development. We'll touch on that in a minute or two. Predictable texts are texts that are often used in schools as first readers, and they often have repetitive sentences like my dad is a firefighter, my mom is a doctor, and they usually come with illustrations, and fundamentally kids can learn these by heart because the sentence is so predictable and repetitive that kids can fake reading in a way without actually being able to read at all. And the way you find this out is basically if you cover the picture and you ask the child just to read the text, they often will stumble because they're not looking at the words on the page, they're looking at the pictures and trying to predict what will come next and use the repetitive sentence that they've already read and learned by heart. So predictable texts are not helpful to beginner readers, and this is one of the kind of texts that actually we need to discard from the classroom or from the library for beginner readers. So let's start at the very beginning. Although I'm going to talk about decodable texts later on, they're at only the end of the process of learning to read. Fundamentally, we need to build up the concept, skills, and knowledge so that when kids come to read the decodable book, they're actually successful and enjoy reading, because fundamentally, reading should be a fun, empowering, exciting experience for beginner readers. So before we can teach this way, we as teachers need to understand the concepts, skills, and knowledge that underpin reading. And that's where I'm going to start my talk. A great overview of what reading is about is the simple view of reading, which was a graphic, a kind of a representation that the researchers Tumner and Goff created in 1986. It's very, very old, and they got it absolutely spot on. They decided that oral language times decoding will create reading comprehension. Oral language is vocabulary and language in general, and decoding is the ability to work out the words from letters to sound on the page, and later becomes word recognition. When decoding becomes very efficient, it becomes word recognition. So oral language times decoding and word recognition is reading comprehension. Now that makes a lot of sense, because if we look at this next slide, you can see that the simple view of reading in black, oral language time decoding equals reading comprehension. It tells us as educators what we need to be doing. We need to be developing two different strands. On the left, the red arrows will show you that oral language is there already for most kids who come into kindergarten, but we need to continue to develop it so that when kids start to become independent readers, they can fall back on their language to comprehend the text. But initially, with very, very beginner readers, you usually find in most children, apart from children who are English language learners, that they already have quite a significant amount of oral language. And it's the decoding that they need to focus on. And that is why all phonics programs will focus on the decoding initially, so that they can bring the decoding up to the level of the oral language. And then once the decoding and the oral language are of the same level, they can continue to develop both. Now, that doesn't mean that you should neglect oral language. Oral language needs to be developed through reading to children, texts which are language rich, genre rich, fiction, non-fiction, world knowledge, really engage children in a wonderful world of reading. And in your library, you'll have many, many books that will do this. The issue is, though, that these books should be read by parents and carers and librarians and adults to children, basically for the purpose of language and vocabulary enrichment. But in parallel, beginner readers need to be given texts that they can decode themselves based on the phonics that they have been taught. So on the right, where you have the purple arrows, you'll see that alphabetic code needs to be taught, phonemic awareness, decoding, encoding needs to be taught before children begin to read decodable books themselves. And once they become fluent readers, this all turns the learning to read to a state where now the kids can read to learn. And at that point, they are able to access age-appropriate fiction, non-fiction texts in school and in the library. Of course, it's always a good thing to continue to develop oral language. And I can remember last trip I made with my kids who are 28 and are 25. We were listening in the car to Robert Louis Stevenson, to Kidnap, because it's still an enjoyable thing to do. And there's no reason why you shouldn't continue either reading to kids, even if they're older and can read, even to your adult kids, because it's such a joy when you are enjoying a fantastic experience of literature. So the importance of the simple view of reading is that it explains to us that you need both strands. You need to have the oral language, the oral comprehension, but you also need to decode. So as educators, often we have to forget that we can read automatically in fluency, and imagine what it's like when you see squiggles on the page, but you don't actually, you can't really identify, don't know what they mean. So this is an example of Hebrew. And I wanted to show it to you to expose you to a script that may not be familiar to you. So what would we need in order to learn Hebrew? First of all, we need to have the oral language. There's no point in learning to decode Hebrew if you can't understand what you're reading. So first would have to be the oral language. But then you'd have to learn the letter sound correspondences, right? And the lastly, you'd have to know how it works, because just knowing the letter sound correspondences doesn't actually tell you how the script works. And here I'm going to show you how Hebrew works. So first thing you need to know is Hebrew works from right to left. That is the orientation of reading. And then you need to know that it goes up and down, that you have consonants in the middle, and sometimes the vowels are at the bottom, and sometimes they're in the middle. So if you'd go, for example, from number 1 down to number 2, you'd have the sound sh added to the vowel a, and that would make the consonant sha. And then if you go from 3 to 4, you'd have l, o, the consonant lo, So that would say shalom. That is the word shalom, which means peace. But of course, if you look at the bottom of the page, it goes from right to left and not from left to right, which is the way our script works. So all these things, a kid in kindergarten in learning to Hebrew would need to learn, apart from what the letters stand for, but also they'd need to know already what the word means. So what about our English writing system? As we said, it's left to right orientation, 26 letters. Now, confusingly, sentences and names begin with capital letters that look completely different. Think, for example, of the letter A, capital A, and the lowercase a, totally different shapes for letters. 44 sounds, 175 odd spellings for those 44 sounds, letters that are reused in different combinations. So for example, in the alphabet, you have the letter S representing the sound S and the letter H representing the sound H. But when they're combined, they represent the sound Sh. So all these different permutations need to be taught. In short, the English language is an opaque writing system. It's very complex. If you compare that to Italian, an Italian student will learn to read in about 3 months. A student learning to read English will take roughly 3 years. And this is why we need to teach it explicitly and systematically. Of course, there are kids who will pick this up on their own, but many kids don't. And the reason why they don't is that it's really complex. So what are the concepts we need to understand that underpin the way the English language script works? The first thing we need to understand, which might seem obvious to us, but won't seem obvious to the beginner reader, is that letters spell sounds of speech. And I've used a font here to show you how all the words in this little text are coded according to the sound. So the word all has 2 sounds, or all. The word words has 1, 2, 3, 4 sounds. D, z. Can has 3, k, a, n. So this is the most important concept, for the first concept that kids need to learn. When they look at that first book and see all these squiggles on the page, they need to understand the letters, the squiggles on the page represent sounds of speech. Now things get more complicated. While in Hebrew or Italian or Spanish, usually letters are represented by 1 letter, maximum 2, but mostly it's just 1-to-1 correspondence of letter to sound. In English, a sound can be spelled by 1 letter, as in the word cat. Each of the letters in the word cat is spelled by each of the sounds in the word cat is spelled by 1 letter. A sound can be spelled by 2 letters. The sh is a 2-letter spelling. A sound can be spelled by 3 letters. The IGH in night is spelled by 3 letters. And the O in the word dough is spelled by 4. Now, if that isn't complex enough, here's the next concept we need to learn. Sounds or phonemes can be spelled in different ways. So the plot thickens. I've given you a sentence here to look at, and it's got 5 different ways to spell the sound E. I'll give you a couple of seconds to look at it and see if you can actually identify the 5 different ways to spell the sound E, the long vowel E. Okay, and here it is. Did you spot all of them? So, really tricky that we have a sound, one of those 44 sounds we talked about earlier, but they don't have the same spelling each time. in every different kinds of words, you have different kinds of spellings. And it's really difficult for kids to learn which spelling belongs in which word. And if that wasn't enough, we have an even more complex concept, and that is a spelling, a letter or more than one letter, can represent different sounds. So let's, for example, take the letter O, which kids learn very, very soon when they're beginning to learn to read. And they might learn it as the short vowel O, as in the word hot, or as in the word stop, or top, or dog. But very soon when they start to read, they will come across the word go. Of course, the letter O in go spells the sound O, and not the short vowel O. And they might come across the word to go somewhere. And there here, the letter O now will spell the sound oo. And of course, they will come across the word love, and the O in the word love will spell the sound ah. So of all the concepts, this is the most complex, that they've learned something and then suddenly find that this letter that they've learned, such as short vowel O, can represent other sounds too. So those are the most important 4 concepts that underpin the English language script. So next we're going to look at the skills. What do we need to be able to do? So as we spoke about it earlier, blending is the fundamental skill of reading. If you see a word like mat, you have to sound out at, mat, mat. And the more you blend, the more you recognize words until this becomes automatic. There's a kind of, with most beginner readers and with struggling readers, if you do a lot of practice, the children at some point suddenly start to recognize words. It's kind of a magic moment that they're sounding out words all the time, and suddenly they start to pick the words off the page. It's a magical moment that I'm always waiting for with my students. The second skill that we mentioned earlier on is they need to be able to segment sounds in order to spell. So if they want to spell the word mat, they need to be able to segment it into 3 sounds, at, mat. Now, often you will find that spelling in schools is disconnected from the segmenting of sounds into words, or of phonemes. Kids are often given a list of words to spell, and the phonics has gone out of the window. So I have a student right now who's been given a list of, a long list of the first 100 high frequency words to learn. And she's being asked to learn them by sight, by shape. And that won't be useful. She's dyslexic. She needs to hold on to segmenting the sounds in words when she spells. And so we need to treat the high frequency words, the sight words, in the same way. And I'll talk about that later on. So that is about segmenting and spelling. And the last skill, which is very important and often not taught in schools, is to manipulate sounds within the word. And manipulating means being able to change a sound. So for example, for the word map, change one sound to lap, or adding a sound, take the word lap and add a sound to lamp, or taking away a sound, like take the word lamp and change it to amp. And usually this activity is done with little cards when children have to switch the cards around and listen very carefully. Now this skill is particularly important when kids are reading, so that when they need to simply adjust and correct themselves in reading, they don't have to start from the beginning of the word. They simply swap one sound from another. So for example, if they read the word to as toe, they immediately know that's wrong and they switch it back to to, right? And that means that they don't have to start oo from the beginning of the word. They simply swap the sound. And this is very, very important as children learn to read, to learn to manipulate the sounds in words. So the next question is, what is the knowledge that we need to know? And this is the big one. A lot, because we have more than 175 representations of the 44 sounds, and that is called the alphabetic code. So here you can see two charts. One is a simpler one for beginner readers on the left, which is yellow and blue. And the other one kind of slightly more cool one on the right, which with more alternatives. And these are fundamentally charts that we have free on our website. You could see the phonicbooks.com website where you can find these under resources, free resources. It's really good to keep as a reference for yourself as a teacher, but also with kids. So for example, when a kid comes, has spelt the word play, P-L-A, which is very common when they first start to spell, they can go to the chart and look at the A spellings and see, and you can show them that the way you spell A in the word play is A-Y, and it usually comes at the end of the word. So this is really how we would use this chart. So we've learned that it's really, really complex, our code. And what do we do when we teach anything complex? We start from simple to complex and do the progression in small steps. And that is why we talk about structured literacy. Structure is everything. It's really, really important, because if you don't have the structure, you're going to lose your learners along the way, which is often what happens with the struggling readers. There isn't enough structure and there isn't enough practice. So from simple to complex, stair-step progression, and we have to have practice and consolidation along the way, and cumulative teaching. Cumulative teaching means that you include what came before in every next step. So the learning that has been done is not lost. Now, if you were to ask me, how do dyslexic learn differently from other kids or struggling readers? Fundamentally, we know that dyslexic kids need the same diet, the same progression as any kid learning to read, but they may need smaller steps to progress. They may need more practice and consolidation, and they definitely need cumulative teaching so they don't forget what you taught them in the previous lesson. So various phonic programs have different progression. We follow the Sounds Right program, which we love very much, and it fundamentally has 4 blocks of learning. The first block is the initial part of the code, which is the simple part of the code. The next block is the extended part of the code, and that is the more complex part of the code, which includes all the vowel teams. And then you need to have a block of teaching of multisyllabic words. And finally, you need to teach morphology, which goes beyond phonics into prefixes, suffixes, root words, and etymology. So, starting at the beginning, let's look at the initial code. And what we have is, like most phonic programs, the simplest part is starting with the sounds of the alphabet within CVC words. CVC is consonant, vowel, consonant words, which are the smallest unit of word that you can start to teach, that you have a lot of words you can work with. Next, once you get to the end of the alphabet, you teach double consonants. And in Sounds Right, unlike other programs, we teach that 2 letters can spell one sound, but the same, we start with the same letters to make it the stair step really, really simple to understand. 2 letters, 1 sound, 2 of the same letters. So we do it with double consonants. Next, we get children to expand their skill of blending, and they have to start blending words with 4 or 5 sounds. Those are words with the structure CVCC, which is consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant, or what you might also know as consonant blends. In the USA, that's a term that's often used. And finally, at the end of the initial part of the code, we will teach the consonant digraphs ch, sh, k, at the end of this part of the block of learning. And once this is secure, we then start to introduce what we call the extended code, and these will be the long vowels A, and we do teach alternative spellings, so we'll teach more than one alternative for the long vowel A, but if you have struggling readers, you could break that down to less. You might start with 2 and add another 1, or add another 2 or 3 and reach 5. But it's very important in the way that we teach that you do teach alternative spellings and don't teach just one spelling for a sound A, and then the next week go to E, and next week go to O, simply because often children don't retain it by the time you come back to A and teach more alternative spelling. So we prefer to teach A in a block, and we build up the alternative spellings one at a time for the struggling readers. So here you have alternative vowel teams for A, E, O, and etc. And you cover the majority of the vowel sounds in the phonic code or in the alphabetic code. I'm not going to talk about multisyllabic words in this presentation, but this is a very important unit. Children mustn't be left to figure out how to read and spell multisyllabic words. It's a very, very important skill, if only because most of the words in our language are multisyllabic, and we have a very important unit of learning, although I can't go there right now because it's not part of this talk. Morphology, very important too. Really, really important for particularly older readers for learning to comprehend, to read, and to spell. So we've got the children decoding, and they are beginning to become fluent. And so this is when you start to see the dual route to reading. And I'd like to show you a word. And this word is, can you read it? So I'm going to give you a moment to actually try and read it. I came across this word when I was doing a little project about eating insect with my students. I thought that would be a good yuck subject to write an argument, expository writing with, actually to debate about whether eating insects was a good idea or not. And I myself struggled to read this word, and I found that I had to break it up into syllables. Entomophagy. So I had to make sure I put the sound from the PH, and also make sure that the G sound was a J and not a G. And so it took me quite a while to get this entomophagy and to know that the accent was on more, entomophagy. I hope I've got that right, by the way. So that shows you the dual route to reading, because I can pretty well read most words on the page, but when I come across a really difficult word, I have to stop, break it down to syllables, and try and figure out within each syllable if I can read it, and then put it back together like a puzzle. So that is the dual route to reading. Most of the words fly off the page for fluent readers, but then when they come to words that they cannot decode, they have to go back to the working out the word, decoding, until they become confident with that word, and then that word too becomes recognized and will fly off the page too when they next see it. So fluency, in order to have fluency, we need to have automatic recognition of words. This enables us to comprehend. If we don't have automatic recognition of words and we're working too hard on working out the words, then our short-term memory is getting blocked up and we can't focus on what the word, the sentence, or the paragraph actually means. So getting automaticity is really, really important. But when we encounter a new word, we resort to decoding it in the same way we had to do when we met the word entomophagy. So here is, I'm going to try and show you a little video of a student of mine, and you can see how she's on the cusp of becoming fluent, but then she has to stop to work out words she's not quite sure of. Please note the fancy pointer and her little movement. She loves to perform. Okay, so here we are. And this is my lovely, I think she was grade 4 student.
A van stopped at the deck. The van has a big dent in it. A man in a vest pops from the van. Yep, next page. A dog is in a pen in the van. The man gets him from the van man yells.
Oh, let's look at that one again.
Yeah, I think him. The dog. Yeah, apple. Yeah.
Oops, have I lost my, I've lost my PowerPoint now. Where am I? Oh, can you see me?
I can see you. We'll just take a minute and.
Okay, I'm just going to go through it again. Oh, I've got it. Can you see that? I've forgotten what I need to do. Right, so I need to share my screen. And here I am. Can you see that?
Yes, we're all set.
Good, lovely.
Oh, good.
So I'm going to, I hope this works. So you can see from that little excerpt, first of all, I hope you love the fancy pointing. And also we could see that when fundamentally she was pretty good to developing fluency with CVC words, short vowel words. But when she came to slightly longer words like the word dump and yanks, she had to revert to decoding. So she was at the very beginning stages of reading. She was doing the same thing as we had to do when we read the word entomophagy, the dual route to reading. And what we need to get is automaticity to release the short-term memory from having to work out the words and focus on the meaning itself. I'm just going to go to slideshow from current slide. We've just done that. Lovely. So now I'm going to focus on the do's and don'ts of our reading. The first thing that's really important when we work with parents and teachers is we talk about precise pronunciation. And that is because we often have grown up with a different way to pronounce the letters of the alphabet, particularly the consonants. So if I was going to ask you, say the sound in the word mat, would you say m-a-t? That's how I would say it before I learnt to teach reading with structured literacy. And what we need to do is say the sounds m-a-t, simply because if we're trying to blend the sounds together, we don't want to have additional schwa sounds after the consonants. So as teachers, we need to train ourselves to say the consonants with precise pronunciation, okay? So the first do is use precise pronunciation of consonants, not m, t, not t. And here are all the consonants that you need to practice with. And I simply wanted to mention that this also applies to the consonant digraph. We want to say sh, not sh, ch, not ch, k, not k. And you will have the voiced, v, the non-voiced, f, and u. Okay? So that's the point about precise pronunciation of consonants. The next do and don't is the importance of teaching letter sounds first. Now, many teachers teach both the names of the alphabet and the sounds together, and they would swear that it works. But I can say as a special needs teacher, somebody working at my center, that often many of the dyslexic kids or struggling readers confuse between letter names and letter sounds. So why does this happen? Well, if you look at the alphabet in the chart ahead, you will see that if you're trying to locate the sound of the letter through the letter name, you will only be successful in 9 out of 26 letters. If you take, for example, the letter A, and initially you need to know that the letter A spells the sound A, you won't be successful. Or if you take the letter C and want to locate the sound K, as in cat, you will not be successful because the letter C starts with S. And as you go through the alphabet, letters, for example, like W, will lead you to the sound D. Y will lead you to the sound W. So basically, using letter names to try and locate the sound of the alphabet is a tricky path. So what we recommend is, yes, we do need letter names, but let's postpone that until the letter sounds are secure. We need letter names for spelling complicated words later on, like vowel teams. We need letter names for dictionary work or being able to sort things in the right order. We need letter names later on, but not initially. So if you have struggling readers, we recommend letter names first. Sorry, I meant letter sounds first. That's an important point to make. The other do's and don'ts, it's very important for teachers to teach spelling and reading together because the code is reversible. So we need to teach decoding, that is reading, and encoding, that is the spelling, in the same lesson. And that is what the Sounds Right program does, and I'm sure many other good phonics programs do. If you teach this way, you will see the children begin to spell from the very beginning. And of course, they may not spell accurately all the words they want to say, but they certainly will seek the closest sound and letter correspondence to what they're writing, and not just write complete random letters, because they will understand that spelling is the reverse activity of reading. So teach reading and spelling together. The code is reversible. One of the best things that I would recommend of doing is always having a little pad of post-it notes when you're reading with a child, because word building is the best activities to clarify how a word is built. You use the post-it notes and you write on each little post-it what the spelling of the word is, and get the child to build it. It could be sh, a 2-letter spelling. It could be IGH, the 3-letter spelling, or even OUGH in the word do or though. If you lay it out in this clear format, it really explains to the child how the word is built of sounds and how those letters represent those sounds. So word building rocks. If you have any difficulties or the child is confused, go back to your little post-it notes and build the word together. And this can also be used with longer words. Word building is also fantastic for teaching multisyllabic words, right? You build a syllable at a time using the post-it notes, and the child can see very, very clearly how each syllable is built. So I love word building. The other thing, the next do and don't is when you come to teaching vowel teams, you need to teach alternative spellings, simply because readers never see just one alternative in a text. Like that sentence I showed you, there'll be always more than one alternative in a text, and they have to get used to seeing it. So teaching just one alternative at a time will actually not benefit struggling readers. You could minimize it to just 2 alternatives and build them up as you go along, but try to teach them together and not separately. This is a very, very good way to transfer the different ways to spell a sound to long-term memory. Now, we do a lot of sorting activities, which means having different vowel team alternatives at the top of the page and giving kids words to sort them out. And we very much recommend this activity. You can find some of these activities, by the way, for free on our website. So as you saw my lovely little student reading, how do we actually read with a beginner reader to make sure that they have the best experience? First principle is we don't accept any guessing. It's always blending sounds into words. That's the fundamentally and primary strategy. It's the most successful and the most reliable. So blending, not guessing. The other thing is we need to keep our finger on the word. Firstly, so kids don't lose their place, but also if there's anything that they need to clarify, then we can point to the letter or the vowel team or the consonant diagraph to help them read the word. So pointing to the words is very important. Now, the reader might encounter words that they can't spell. So what we want to do is we want to get them to use the knowledge they already have. So if, for example, we encounter a word like say, and they don't know how to read that, you can say, you read the first sound, and they will say, s. And then you would provide, as a teacher or as an adult, the sound A, and they would put it together, say. Yeah, that spells say, A, say. So you're continuously referring to the different spellings in the word, or graphemes, if you want to use a fancier word. Again, if you come across a spelling that they don't know, you provide the missing spelling. Now, for those children who are very slow readers, I often reread the sentence after they finish the sentence so that they can get the meaning. If the reading is very slow and laborious, they probably won't be able to access the meaning of the sentence. So I will often swish my finger underneath the sentence and reread it after them so they can still enjoy the book while they are struggling with the decoding. Vocabulary is very, very important. We really believe it's also an opportunity to develop vocabulary, particularly for those kids who have either a language disability, or for those kids who don't come from a language-rich home, or they might be English language learners. So always explain the vocabulary that you encounter when reading. Great way to get kids to understand the story and to use the vocabulary is to retell the story. It's also a great way to check their comprehension and to ask them questions when they retell the story. Fluency has recently come up as a really, really important skill to develop that automaticity we were talking about. And the best way to get children to become fluent is to reread a text. That can be difficult sometimes because kids often don't want to do the same thing again. I might ask my student to reread the text with expression, or I might video them so they can show their parents. I will think of lots of inventive ways to get them to reread the text. As it happens, we have workbooks that have text in it too, that basically repeat and revisit the text in our reading series. So if you are looking for resources that help children reread a text, you might want to look at them. I'll show some of those later on. So sight words. Sight words is a big issue because teachers are very, very keen for kids to learn the first 100, then 200, then 300 most common words. And these are called sight words simply because some people believe that they're not decodable, therefore should be taught by sight. But actually, for the struggling readers we're talking about, they don't learn well by sight, because if they would have learned well by sight, they wouldn't be struggling. Therefore, we need to break down the sight words into spellings of sounds in the same way we do any other word. This, for example, is the word said. The reader will already know the sounds and d. The difficult part in the middle is AI, and I would say this spells F. And if I want to explain it, I might say that the word said used to be pronounced said in the way that pay is paid and lay is linked to laid, and say is actually now no longer said said, we pronounce it as said. I'm trying to tell them a little story. And then I'll introduce other words that have the same spelling for e, again and against. Now, why is it important to make these links? It's really important because I recently found out about Scher's self-teaching hypothesis, which basically says, how is it that kids learn to read so many words that we taught them? And the assumption is that kids will self-teach. They will self-teach themselves new words they never encountered. And in order to help them do that, if we break a word like house, if we map it out according to sound and spelling, then we will help them make connections to other words. If we teach the word house as a shape, they might remember it. They often don't remember it because they'll have all the letters in the word but in the wrong order. But if we help them map the word out, they're more likely to continue this self-teaching, right? And this is a very important point, and why I'd like to emphasize that even sight words need to be mapped out when taught to kids. Now we move on to decodable books. So what are decodable books? Decodable books are controlled text. They are controlled reading exercises that require kids to put to use the phonics they have learned. Decodable books are not high literature. They're not competing with the wonderful picture books that kids can pick up in libraries and read at home. They are reading exercises. They're basically taking the phonics and embedding it in text so that we can practice and practice until we get automatic reading, until we get word recognition. We're seeking that quick automatic word recognition. Once that's established, we can then focus on comprehension. And to now recognize that decodable texts are a very important tool in learning to read. They are very important. They have a very important place in the process of practicing decoding. So in the past, teachers would teach phonics, but actually give kids either leveled readers or totally random books to read. And those other random books would usually have sight words embedded them in, and the kids would have to guess to read them because they had no tools to decode them. This would be the equivalent of teaching addition, but then actually giving the kids exercises in multiplication. We know that doesn't work. We know that when we teach something, we then need to give it the kids practice of that same concept or skill we have taught. And that's exactly what decodable books do. They offer children opportunity to practice certain spellings, and then they can read those spellings within a meaningful and often, hopefully, fun experience of reading. So that is what a decodable text is. And if you were to ask me how we start writing a decodable text, a decodable text always starts with a list of words. The list of words is what we want kids to be able to read. And after that, we build a story onto that list of words. And you'll have a chance to look at some of our decodable books in a minute. So how do they support phonics? First of all, phonics is a very abstract thing. Asking a child to listen to the sounds in the word cat, at, is a very abstract thing. But if you actually put phonics to use, it gives phonics a purpose. We learn to read in order to read a fun book. So decodable books give phonics a purpose. As we said, it provides the practice and the rehearsal that kids need to develop in order to develop that automaticity, and also to remember the letter to sound correspondences within words. Because decodable books work when you blend words, it encourages blending and not guessing. If you guess, you're less likely to get it right. If you blend, you will succeed. Therefore, we're training the brain to work in this way. Blend the sound, find the word, and then you will succeed. As you noticed, my little lovely student, she knew she had to go back to the beginning of the word to sound out the words when she couldn't figure out what it was. And every time she was successful. We need kids to succeed. And one of the best ways to get them to succeed is to give them the tools to succeed. And decodable books offer them the tools to succeed. And then we get motivation. And then we have kids buying into reading and becoming independent. The great thing about decodable books is a kid can take the book home and read it to his parents independently, on condition they've been taught the phonics beforehand. So it's really important to match the teaching to the text. As we heard before, teachers haven't always understood the importance of making sure that the decodable book they give to their students matches what they've been teaching. This will ensure a successful experience, but also a purposeful experience. We are reading this text in order to read words of this kind or read these kinds of spellings that I've just taught you. So if a teacher was teaching the very, very first sounds of the alphabets, at, I, m, we'd expect the text to look like this, right? Words with at, I, m. As you can see, you have 3 of those sounds that are the target sounds in that book, on that first page in the book. That comes from our Dandelion Launches series, I think. So for example, if the teacher was teaching the spelling CK, this is for an older reader. Have a look at it. Can you pick out any words with CK in them? And here they are. The word kick, back, black, all have CK. And those would be the target words, the words embedded in the text. If a teacher was further down the road with a student and she was teaching different ways to spell the long vowel O, that would be a text you could use. Have a look at that quickly. Can you see words with the long vowel O? And here they are. This is how you match your teaching to your reading. So, as Marianne mentioned, when we first started teaching at the Bloomfield Learning Center, which I still teach with Claire Baker, she's also a teacher there, and Claire is the illustrator of our younger books that you just saw now. We felt that our older readers who come at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, sometimes older, were unwilling to read the books that we had at the center because either they had seen them in school when they were in kindergarten, or they just weren't engaging. So we set about thinking about what would engage older readers who had to start from the very beginning of reading. And so we wanted our books first to be age appropriate in story and in illustration. Many of these students suffer from low self-esteem. They know that they're failing. They know that they're behind their peers. They're disaffected, they might not want to read, they're very ashamed of their reading. So the first thing we need to know is make the books cool, age appropriate, and not babyish, not demeaning. The second thing, we needed to make them engaging. So we needed to make the illustrations capture them, not just the stories. They needed to have a book that other kids in the class would say, oh, that's really cool. What happens in the book that you're reading? The other thing that's really important is these are not high-low readers. These are decodable books, which means that these are not created in order to develop fluency. They're created in order to fill the missing gaps as the reader develops fluency. Because when you just have high-low readers, which are basically low level of text but high interest, the kids will get stuck on a certain level of reading, but they will have phonic gaps in their learning. They won't be able to decode more complex words. So our series always builds stair-step progression with practice at each level, as we said before. It's really important to build up the phonic knowledge and to build up the skills and not stay stagnant at one level. So as we said, decodable books should provide the practice and consolidation. And here, for example, is our very, very first book for older struggling readers. It's the Moon Book Set 1. And you can see the style we approach is slightly manga, very, very simple text. You can see the stair-step progression we talked about. This is in the inside cover, and each book will show you what the letters in that book are. But it's also cumulative progression, we mentioned that, so that book 2 will have the letters from book 1, book 3 will have the letters from book 2 and 1, etc. Really, really important to consolidate, revisit, and really, really make solid phonic foundation before they move on. So this is Moondog, and this is the kind of text that would be in Moondog Set 1, CVC, which is short vowel words. You can see we've tried to make it fun, but the level of the reading is kindergarten level. Another one from the Moondogs Set 2 series. This book introduces the sound sh in the word shed. Again, cool characters. Also, you can see quite diverse characters from all sorts of kinds of kids from our community. And there's a game in each book, right? We really, really believed in games in a way of motivating, but also practicing the skills. So at the back of each book, you have a game in the book that you can play without even reproducing it on a photocopier. You simply can play it with a few counters at the end of the book with your reader. Moving up a little bit, we have our Moondog Set 3, and this series is for kids who need to learn the alternative vowel spellings in a very, very stair-step progression. So they introduce only 2 alternative vowels. This is, for example, long vowel A, and you can have AI and A spellings in this book. So if I'd show you the scope and the sequence, there you can see the first book focuses on A, the second on E, the third on O. Now, you can read the series in that order, or you can use this series alongside of other series that introduce more alternatives. So I might start with this book A, then teach more alternatives, and then go to another series and read the book with more alternatives, so that we're staying within A, we're simply building the number of alternatives as we go along. Here's an example of the Moondog set 3. It focuses on long vowel E. If you look closely at the text, you'll be able to see the 2 ways to spell E that the book introduces. Have a look, and here they are. You have EA and double E as the alternatives that this book has embedded in the text. If you remember, I mentioned that before we start writing any series of decodable books, we start with a word list. We start with words we want to weave into the text to make sure that the kids have enough exposure until the words start to become fluent and they start to recognize them. Here's an example of O. If you look closely at the text, you will see a couple of the spellings of the long vowel O, and here they are, OW and OA. Moving beyond the Moondog series, which are our very, very first series, we then have a number of series which kids love to read because basically they're an adventure series that start with book 1 and end with book 12. Now, this is a fantastic way to engage kids because they want to know what happens at the end of the story. It's like an adventure with a beginning and an end. So we really get kids to read 12 books and want to read them in order to know what happens next. Our very first 2 books of our series are Magic Belt and That Dog. And the great thing about having more than one series is that you can offer the kids a choice. Those kids who love fantasy can choose the Magic Belt. Those kids who love dog can choose That Dog. You as a teacher or as a librarian have the option of reading both books in parallel because the progression, the stair-step progression of both series is identical. Therefore, I sometimes might give a series for kids to read at home, while in my lessons I will use the parallel series. So it gives you power as a teacher to expose the kid, to expose the student to more reading to get that fluency going. Here's the sequence and scope of That Dog series, which is the same as Magic Belt. You can see it starts with CVC words, short vowel words, and then continues to consonant blends, etc. And it grows and introduces the consonant digraphs at the end and with a few suffixes throughout. Here's an example. The Magic Belt has fewer words than That Dog, but you can see that the Magic Belt moves from short vowel words to consonant blends. The same with That Dog series. The focus of this book is 4 sound words like pats, like pond, like dogs. It's about getting the kid to move from CVC short vowel words into longer words which they have to blend together. Here's another example. Here the target words are left and belt. Again, we're getting them to 4 sound words, and the same in That Dog, although there's a bit more text in That Dog. Our next 2 series are Totem and Alba. Again, these 2 parallel series, and these are a bit of a kind of rapid catch-up series for kids who actually have some notion of the initial code, sounds of the alphabet and consonant digraphs, but they need to be reminded before they go into vowel teams. Again, 2 parallel series with the same progression. So you have the same idea of, this is the level of word you'll see is trust, C, CV, CC, consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant. And in Alba, you'll see the words drink and stand as the target words on that page. Moving on, we have 3 series, so the choice gets even broader or when we want to introduce the vowel teams, and these are all alternative vowel teams. So you have a fantasy series, Talisman 1, you have Rescue, and you have Island Adventure with a kind of ecological theme. All of them are fantastic. Do note that we also have series with girl heroines, Alba and Erin. We don't always have fantasy, and we don't always have boys at the center of the story. That's really, really nice for dyslexic girls who actually want to read about girls having a great adventure. Vocabulary, as I mentioned, is very important to us. So inside of each book, you will have vocabulary in that book to discuss, to use, and to revisit. The fact that the children are struggling readers doesn't mean they can't learn words as they go, as they learn to decode them. And so we always include interesting words that the children can decode. And here we always have a reading practice page, which will help the teacher focus on what she needs to make sure that children can read before they read the decodable book. So this page will be from Rescue, and it'll also be from Talisman, 2 series, and from Island Adventure. All have a reading practice page. Make sure children can read these and do the work you need to do to teach this before they read the book. So here are examples of pages from the text. This is a Talisman one on the left. You'll see it focuses on vowel teams of long E, and there they are. And on the right, you have Rescue, and it focuses on vowel teams of O, and there they are. Here, 2 more pages, on the left, and I in our Island Adventure. I love this picture of the rabbit. It's my favorite one of Erin climbing the stairs up on the rabbit. She gets shrunk. The whole series of Alba and Erin is about these girls who get shrunk to the size of tin cans, and they have a huge adventure with the big outside world. Moving on, we're going to the more difficult part of the code. This is Titan Gauntlet. We have 2 series that continue, Titan Gauntlet and Talisman 2. And here now we are focusing on the sound U. You can see the word using, futile, stupid. Notice that we are including quite difficult words like futile and even words like dislodged. We want our kids to have rich vocabulary, and there's no reason why they can't learn it. We know that teaching vocabulary is best taught embedded in context of story and relevance. And this is one of the ways to do that. Also, as I mentioned, we do have vocabulary activities in our workbooks if you want to kind of consolidate that. Here's our last series, which is called Amber Guardians. It tries to extend the amount of text that children can read, so they don't get stuck on reading just half a page with an illustration. They need to be able to read a whole page of text. So we alternate the illustrations with whole pages of text in this adventure series. From the point of view of the phonics, we've moved on to morphology, and the workbook for Amber Guardian starts to teach base words, suffixes, prefixes, and root words. So I mentioned we have workbooks. Now the workbooks are very important for consolidation of activities. And each workbook is divided into chapters according to the number of books in the series. So chapter 1 will relate to book 1, chapter 2 will relate to book 2, etc. Every chapter will be divided into activities that activities that need to happen before reading a book to prepare the reader. And these will be word building, phoneme manipulation, reading and spelling together, caption reading and spelling. All these activities we've spoken about already, which will build up the skills for the successful reading experience. If you're reading a book with alternative spellings for vowels, then you need to do reading and sorting before reading the book. Here they are. This is an example of word building, example of teaching reading and spelling together, example of phoneme manipulation, example of reading and spelling captions. Now, once you've done those, you can read the book with your student. And then after that come all the activities which will expose the student to the text again: comprehension, vocabulary, sequencing, retelling the story, punctuation, fluency, and games. And these all follow reading the book. So you have quite a lot of work that you can do around each book in the series. Here's an example of comprehension. We've taken out the questions and having to write the answers because so many of our students struggle with writing. They kind of lose the will to live because they have problems with their handwriting and their punctuation and their letter formation, etc. We just want to focus on comprehension. We want to make it a fun activity. So this is the kind of comprehension activity you'd find in the workbook that you would do after reading the story in the book. We talked about the importance of vocabulary. This is a kind of matching activity, going over what the words mean, matching them to make sense. Comprehension and punctuation. Now, punctuation is very important also because you can't really do it unless you can comprehend the sentence. If you don't comprehend the sentence, you don't know where it comes to its end. and where to put the full stop. So this is an example of a simple comprehension and punctuation activity. Then we talked about reading fluency. Usually I get my student to read the text once and then to read it a second time with more expression. Really, really important to revisit the same text in any old way that you can think of. And of course, we have a game at the end of each book, which is a fun snakes and ladder with the characters from the story. Just want to mention, we also have card games, which are very popular. I know that during COVID times, it's a bit difficult to play cards if you're not actually teaching one-to-one, but in any, let's say, family situation for parents, this is a great resource because kids always love playing games and it consolidates their phonics. We have two different sets of games that cover most of the alphabetic code. So here we've come to the end, where to purchase our books. We have 4 different distributors in the USA, High Noon, Crossbow, Visor Educational, and PDX Reading Specialist. And you could, if you're interested in purchasing our books, basically go to any of those distributors in the US. I just wanted to mention, last thing is that we have a lot of infographics on our phonicbooks.com website. We have examples of the sentences I showed you, where you have different ways to spell a sound. We have examples of little charts of showing alternative spellings. We have charts showing alternative sounds with the same spelling as I showed in my presentation. So if you want to explore our phonicbooks.com, do explore for all these 3 resources, which you'll find very useful in your teaching or you're trying to explain to kids how the alphabetic code works. So I've come to the end. How are we doing? Gosh, that was long.
It was so informative, and there were so many comments just thanking you for sharing the information. I felt almost elated. I mean, it was like gospel coming from your lips to those of us who just want to see the how and see it put together and be able to explain it to educators, to other parents, to teachers. This was so good. And I did want to, there is a question, but I did want to add too, with our library program, most of the libraries are buying from High Noon. It doesn't matter where people buy from, but High Noon has been very supportive of trying to make it easier for the libraries to obtain, to obtain the books. They've been a great partner in the program. And I also wanted to add your phonics code chart that you pointed out in the presentation. I truly can't remember if it's currently posted in our hub because we're always having some crash or another, but I know we do send those to the librarians, and we really try to encourage everyone to hang those from a bulletin board and really use those as resources as you're trying to map the best way to help a child learn to read. And the last thing I'm going to add before I get to the question is the workbooks. And, I've spoken to libraries that have purchased your series, and I've encouraged them to also get the workbooks because it really is a complete program. And besides literacy, and in this country, with a lot of literacy tutors, we're glad to see the resources in the libraries, but also parents who are working with their own children. The workbooks really do simplify it, and it's a complete reading program from early emergent readers to older readers, and we really hone in on the older readers because there just isn't a lot, and these are engaging decodable books. And I put in the comment box, children are not embarrassed by them because so often kids, we have the scholastic book fairs and kids leave with these giant books that we know they don't read just because they want to look like other children, and these are books that maybe a struggling reader can read and they don't have to be embarrassed by it. So, it's so wonderful that you have so many different characters, the diversity, and the selection. So that's enough for me. I'm going to get to the, we have an excellent question from Tracy, and it's such a common one. What is an effective way to determine what level to start with an older struggling reader at?
Well, there's certain pinch points, certain points which the first thing you need to do is you need to check their phonemic awareness. I find the best, basically they need to find out if they can blend, segment, and manipulate phonemes. So we do have an assessment on our website, which you can use for free. You will have to ignore some of the books that haven't been created into American editions yet. The books that we have in the UK are slightly different because the phonics, the pronunciation of American, particularly vowels, is different from the way, as you probably noticed with my posh Flummy accent, is a bit different than the way you pronounce a vowel. Therefore, every time we convert a series from UK English, we have to go through a process of making sure that the pronunciation and the spellings are adhered to the American accent and not to the UK, particularly my accent, which is south of England. I don't even speak the same as Northern England or as Scottish people or as Irish people or as Welsh people. So unfortunately, because I live in London, we dominate the accent of the UK. So I would recommend that you go to the website and download the free decodable resource from phonicbooks.co.uk and use what you can. You'll have a very good assessment there, but you'll have to pick and choose the books that only are available in the US and not the ones that are available in the UK. In general, you have to check whether kids know the sounds of the alphabet with pure pronunciation. You need to know if they can blend 4 or 5 sounds together, and that often is a kind of stumbling block, right? You need to check whether they know their consonant digraphs, and then you need to know whether they understand the concept of vowel teams and build up the vowel teams, right? Okay. If you go to our assessment on the phonicbooks.co.uk, you will be able to discover where your child is at in those various stages.
Okay.
Was that helpful?
I think it is, and I know who asked the question, so maybe we could even work together to see if there's any adjustments for the.
Right. I can tell you what one of the best things to tell of how reading a child is doing is basically a non-word reading test. That is a very, very quick, diagnosis of if they've never seen the word before, what do they do? Mm-hmm. So if you have one like with a non-word with a short vowel, if you have one with 4 different sounds or 5 different sounds, that is a very, very good indicator of where they're at, because usually kids who've got a very solid phonics foundation will be able to decode a non-word, a nonsense word. Those who are not sure and are used to guessing or used to trying to seek meaning, not just the decoding, they may stumble on it. So that's a very good, I always do a non-word reading test when I get a new student, because that's the most, so for example, I've just got a new student and she can't read 4 and 5 sound words. So I then pinpointed my teaching from, let's start from 4 and 4 sound words, lost, grab. So basically I'm working with the Magic Belt 1 and that dog, both series in parallel, because she cannot blend 4 sounds together. And if you can't do that, you will get stuck later on.
Okay, great. That was very, very helpful. The next question, more practical, is there a Canadian distributor?
Yes, we do have. They're called Foothills.
Okay, Foothills.
Foothills Education or Foothills.
Okay. All right, well, I don't, let's see. A few more questions are coming in. I'm in a couple of different platforms, so excuse me if I get a little bit befuddled whether somebody's asking you a question or they're trying to answer somebody else's questions, but I'm gonna ask this anyway. What programs do you recommend to teach those prerequisite phonological awareness and phonics skills you mentioned?
Well, I would recommend getting trained, if you can, getting trained in a high quality phonics program, because that should have it included. A good, high quality phonics program will have the phonemic awareness unit as part of it. And I think that, that's the best recommendation I would say, because then it gives you the whole picture of how to, you know, what to do next, to spot the difficulties, what to do about the difficulties, how to teach blending, for example, when kids struggle. This is all part of a good quality phonics program. So I would basically find one of those.
Okay.
I mean, we follow Sounds Right.
Yes.
I know that another linguistic phonics program in the US is Reading Simplified. Marnie Ginsberg also has a very, very good program. You might want to talk to her. I've seen her videos. She has activities called Switch It, which are phoneme manipulation. She has the sorting of vowel teams I spoke to. So maybe Reading Simplified would be a good place to go. This is Marnie Ginsberg.
Okay. I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to end our recording and get us out of Facebook. And thank you, everybody, for being here and listening, and for all the wonderful feedback. And this will be up for, you know, for a little while. And Tammy will be checking the questions if anything else comes up. So enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone.
Thank you for having me, everyone.